Have you ever looked at a website or an app and just felt like it gets you? Well, that's not an accident. It's psychology. Today, we're going to pull back the curtain and look at the hidden mental shortcuts that secretly guide every single click a user makes. This is where design meets the human mind. And trust me, it's fascinating.
So let's kick things off with a question you've definitely seen before. You're on a pricing page, right? And for some reason, your cursor just naturally ends up hovering over that middle Pro option. Why is that? Is it just a logical choice? Not really. The real answer is all about these predictable little glitches in how we think.
And these glitches have a name: cognitive biases. You can think of them as your brain's factory settings. They're these super fast mental shortcuts that help us make sense of the world without getting overwhelmed. They're not always perfectly logical, but they're incredibly predictable. And for a UX designer, knowing how these work is basically a superpower.
Okay, let's start where every user does, at the very beginning. Those first few seconds after someone lands on your page are, and I mean this, absolutely crucial. They're not just looking around, their brain is already being shaped by some really powerful biases that will color their whole experience.
You ever have a thought like this? This is what we call the anchoring bias. It's this funny thing our brain does where it latches onto the very first piece of information it sees. That first number becomes the anchor, and from then on, every other price or number we see is judged based on that starting point.
And here's a classic example of that in action. You see that crossed out $99? That's the anchor. It immediately sets your brain's idea of the software's value way up high. So when you see the actual price, $49, it doesn't just feel like 49 bucks. It feels like a total bargain, like you're saving a ton of money. That's the anchor doing all the heavy lifting.
Okay, here's another big one for first impressions: the halo effect. This is when our positive feelings about just one thing, like a really slick visual design, spill over and create a halo that makes us assume everything else about the product must be great too.
And the big takeaway here is that good design isn't just window dressing. It builds trust right out of the gate. If a user thinks your website is beautiful, they're way more likely to believe it's also secure, reliable, and easy to use. They'll even forgive little usability mistakes later on, all because of that strong, positive first impression.
All right, so you've nailed the first impression. Awesome. But now your user is actually in your product, clicking around, making choices. This is where a whole new set of biases come into play, influencing everything from what they click on to what they decide to buy.
This little thought is the sound of the decoy effect working its magic. See, when we're trying to choose between two similar things, it can be tough. But if you introduce a third option, one that's clearly a little bit worse than one of the others, it suddenly makes that other option look way, way better. The decoy isn't meant to be picked. It's just there to make you feel really good about another choice. And here it is, the answer to our very first question. Check out this table. That middle Pro plan is a textbook decoy. Look, for $28, you get 45 gigs of storage. But for just $2 more, you can get the Pro Plus plan with more storage and priority support. Suddenly, the Pro Plus plan looks like an incredible deal. The decoy makes the decision for you. Without it, you'd just be comparing the $10 and $30 plans, and that's a much bigger leap.
Now, while a good decoy can help guide a decision, you have to be careful. We always think we want more choices, but our brains, not so much. This is called choice overload. When you give us too many options, we tend to get overwhelmed, our brains just kind of freeze up, and we end up not choosing anything at all.
And the data on this is pretty wild. There was this famous study with jam tasting. When they offered a ton of different jam flavors, people were interested, but few actually bought anything. But when they offered just a handful of options, sales went way up. As a designer, your job isn't to show people every single thing they could do, but to make it easy for them to do the right thing. Last but not least for this section, let's talk about memory. The serial position effect is a fancy term for a really simple idea. When we see a list of things, we're most likely to remember the very first thing we saw and the very last thing we saw. Everything in the middle? Yeah, that just kind of turns into a blur.
So how can you use this? It's actually super simple and really powerful. In your navigation menu, put the most important thing like Home first. It's what people will see and remember. Then put your main goal, your big call to action button like Sign Up, last. It's the final thing they process. All the other stuff like About Us or Careers, they can hang out in the middle.
So look, knowing all this stuff is one thing, but actually using it is a whole other ballgame. This knowledge isn't about learning how to trick people.
It's about having empathy. It's about understanding the quirks of the human brain so you can design things that just feel easy and natural.
So what's the big picture here? First, remember that your users are human, not robots. They're not always going to be perfectly rational. Your job is to design with their mental shortcuts in mind. You want to simplify their choices, guide them towards their goals, and use these principles to genuinely help them, not to manipulate them. That's the core of good, ethical design.
So I'll just leave you with this one question to think about. You've now got a little window into how your user's brain works. You know about the invisible forces that shape their decisions every day. The real challenge, and honestly the real responsibility, is how you're going to use that knowledge to guide their journey for the better. So, how will you get started?